centuries, kings, priests, and philosophers failed to solve a single riddle: the nature of woman. They wrote laws, preached sermons, and sang poetry, yet they remained blind. But one man, a forbidden psychoanalyst, dared to see what others could not. He was silenced, his work buried, his name erased, and yet he solved the mystery. Today, we uncover what was never meant for your eyes: the truths of female nature. History remembers its victors, not its outcasts. But power, as Machiavelli himself once whispered through the pages of The Prince, often hides in the shadows, waiting for those bold enough to uncover it. And so we begin with a man you were never meant to know. A thinker who challenged the myths of love, the illusions of romance, and the sanctity of womanhood itself. He was not celebrated in classrooms, nor was his portrait hung in marble halls. He was erased, banned, and cursed because he uncovered truths that society had sworn to protect. He was the forbidden thinker, the psychoanalyst who solved the riddle of female nature. Imagine the world he lived in. A stage where philosophers clothed women in poetry, artists painted them as saints or sirens, and priests declared them either the downfall of Eden or the guardians of virtue. For centuries, men had spoken about women without ever seeing them clearly. They worshipped and they feared, but they did not understand. This psychoanalyst, however, refused to bow before illusions. He studied where others dreamed. He dissected where others adored. And for this audacity, he was silenced. Do you understand the gravity of that? At a time when Freud was building a kingdom of theories around the unconscious mind, and Jung was mapping the archetypes of myth, this man turned his eyes towards something far more dangerous. He did not ask what women symbolized in stories. He asked what they were in reality. Not the idealized version of them, not the glorified images sung in operas and whispered in church pews, but the flesh and blood forces that shaped families, dynasties and empires. Where others saw mystery, he saw strategy. Where others saw innocence, he saw instinct. And that sight, my listener, made him untouchable, unbearable, and unforgivable to the society that bred him. The forbidden thinker did not write for applause. He did not seek popularity, nor did he soften his words to charm readers. His writings were knives, sharp and uncompromising. Cutting through centuries of delusion, he revealed that female psychology was not a gentle garden of emotions, but a fortress, fortified by desire, survival, and cunning. And what does the world do to those who speak truths that disrupt the order? It silences them. It brands them heretics. It buries their names beneath layers of dust, while elevating the harmless dreamers to pedestals. That is why you know Freud, but not him. That is why you quote Jung, but not the man who went further. His exile was not only from institutions, but from history itself. He was banned not because his ideas were absurd, but because they were too piercing, too corrosive, too dangerous to the myths upon which society rested. For what civilization can survive when its most sacred illusions are stripped bare? When the veil over female nature is torn away, the balance of power shifts. Men no longer kneel blindly. Women no longer wield mystery as a weapon cloaked in innocence. Order unravels. And so, his work was not debated in the open halls of academia. It was buried in whispers, hidden away like contraband, circulating only among those audacious enough to search for it. Understand this: the forbidden thinker was not an enemy of women. He was an enemy of illusion. And illusions are what society feeds on. His theories suggested that beneath the surface of politeness, beneath the ceremonies of marriage and the declarations of love, lies a battlefield of instincts and power plays. To expose this was to strip civilization naked, and no society forgives the man who shows it the mirror. The Greeks killed Socrates for corrupting youth with inconvenient questions. The church burned heretics for daring to interpret scripture differently. And in the modern world, thinkers who revealed too much about sex, desire, and power were dismissed as lunatics, or their works were locked away under the label of obscenity. Such is the fate of those who speak truths before their time. So when you hear his name, know that you are hearing a ghost, a man erased by the very civilization that pretends to value free thought, a man who stood before the most dangerous riddle, female nature, and declared that he had solved it. His insights were not sweet. They were not flattering. They did not comfort men, nor did they elevate women. They burned away illusions until only the raw machinery of psychology remained. And for this crime, he became the forbidden thinker, condemned not because he was wrong, but because he was uncomfortably right. For as long as men have ruled empires, they have stumbled before the same riddle woman. Armies have conquered continents, kings have bent nations to their will, yet even the most powerful rulers found themselves powerless in the chambers of their queens, their courtesans, their lovers. History itself is littered with the ruins of men who mastered the art of politics, only to fail in the politics of desire. The forbidden psychoanalyst asked the question others feared: why is the nature of woman so difficult to grasp, and why has it remained unsolved through centuries of philosophy, poetry, and law? Think for a moment. Religions declared women holy or damned, angels of purity or daughters of temptation. Philosophers wrote endlessly, either glorifying them as muses or condemning them as distractions from higher truth. Poets drowned themselves in metaphors of beauty, love, and heartbreak. But what none of these men dared to do was look without filters, without worship or contempt, without the need to call women either goddess or demon. For in truth, woman was neither. She was something else entirely. And it is this something else that made her the greatest puzzle of human existence. Men wanted certainty. They wanted women to be predictable, stable, ruled by logic, like the fields they tilled or the laws they wrote. But instead they found changeability, moods shifting with seasons, affections kindled one day and extinguished the next. They found passion that could consume like fire, yet turn cold without reason. They found loyalty that seemed eternal, until a new opportunity opened a hidden door. And because they could not map this mystery, men wrapped it in poetry, declaring that women were unknowable, mystical, beyond reason. The forbidden thinker did not accept this excuse. He declared that the so-called mystery of women was not mystical at all. It was strategic. It was survival disguised as mystery. In his view, the puzzle of female nature was not about beauty or love, but about necessity. For thousands of years, women lived in a world where physical strength belonged to men, where political and military power excluded them, where their survival depended not on brute force but on cunning. Deprived of direct strength, they perfected indirect power. They learned the art of influence, of persuasion, of emotional maneuvering. What men called mystery was in truth the refined skill of adapting, of surviving, of winning battles without swords. And when he wrote these words, the psychoanalyst shattered the illusions that protected society's romantic view of womanhood. He asked, why do men always speak of women as if they were eternal enigmas? Because to admit otherwise would expose men's weakness. To admit that women's power lies not in confusion, but in clarity, in strategy, is to confess that men were never truly in control. For every empire that claimed dominance, there were queens, mistresses, mothers, and wives who guided its hidden gears. The puzzle of female nature is not that women are unknowable, but that they are too often misread, because men look through the lens of desire, blinded by what they wish to see, rather than what stands before them. Consider how this puzzle plays out in the smallest corners of daily life. A man thinks he has won a woman's affection, only to find that she has been testing him all along. He thinks her tears reveal weakness, but they mask negotiation. He believes her tenderness is proof of devotion, but at times it is simply the instrument of influence. She is not the passive recipient of male advances that men's fantasies imagined her to be. She is an active strategist, calculating when to yield and when to resist, when to inspire loyalty and when to withhold it. And men, blind in their arrogance, call this inconsistency, when in fact it is mastery. The psychoanalyst revealed that the puzzle is not unsolvable. It is only uncomfortable to solve. For when men finally understand the patterns of female behavior, they are forced to abandon comforting myths that women are guided purely by love, or that loyalty flows effortlessly from affection. Instead, they must see the harder truth that female nature is guided by necessity, sharpened by survival, and cloaked in 1,000 shifting masks. The puzzle was never about mystery. It was about power, and power, as Machiavelli reminds us, is never surrendered willingly. but always disguised in ways that allow it to be exercised without detection. This is why for centuries the riddle of woman remained unsolved. Not because it could not be solved, but because solving it was dangerous. To understand female nature clearly is to remove the illusions upon which romance, marriage, and society itself were built. And the forbidden thinker was willing to risk exile to declare this truth: that what men call the puzzle of woman is not confusion, but strategy, not weakness, but strength, not mystery, but survival refined into art. There are truths we tolerate, and then there are truths we bury. The psychoanalyst we speak of did not bother with the former. He went straight for the latter. The truths that civilized men could not accept, truths that polite society refused to even whisper, truths that expose the inner mechanics of female psychology in ways too sharp, too merciless, too dangerous. They were not written to soothe. They were written to wound, and in that wound lay clarity. He declared that female desire is not bound by loyalty. It is bound by opportunity. A woman's affection, though intense, is never eternal. It is conditional, tied not to the vows of yesterday, but to the prospects of tomorrow. Men dream of permanence, women adapt to circumstances. To the man blinded by love, this sounds cruel. To the strategist, it is nature at work. For in a world where survival demanded flexibility, the female instinct learned to abandon stagnation and seek movement. What men called betrayal was often nothing more than the instinct to live, to secure, to improve. This truth unsettled the foundations of romance, for it suggested that loyalty was never a given, but a negotiation renewed only as long as conditions remained favorable. He went further. He warned men that emotions, often dismissed as weakness, were in fact women's most formidable weapons. A man may strike with fists or words, but a woman can disarm with a tear, a smile, a silence heavy with unspoken judgment. To the untrained, these gestures appear accidental. To the forbidden thinker, they were precision strikes, honed over centuries, as effective as any blade. Anger, sadness, tenderness, these were not simply feelings. They were tools, deployed with instinctive mastery. The woman who seemed overwhelmed was often the one in control, guiding the man's reactions, shaping his choices, maneuvering him without his knowledge. And then came his most brutal claim, that tenderness itself could be calculation. What men embraced as proof of devotion, he revealed as, at times, the most effective form of persuasion. A soft touch on the arm, a whispered word at the right moment, a look that promised warmth. These were not always signs of love. They were signals designed to influence, to bend decisions, to redirect power without confrontation. The male ego, desperate to believe in its control, mistook these gestures for surrender. But in truth, they were strategies of command. The battlefield was not the throne room or the Senate, but the home, the bed, the heart. The psychoanalyst stripped away the illusions that men clung to, showing them that the so-called mystery of woman was not mystery at all, but mastery hidden beneath layers of myth. And yet, this revelation terrified society. For if women were not fragile beings in need of protection, but cunning strategists playing a deeper game, what became of the stories that men told themselves about their superiority? What became of the laws that framed men as rulers and women as subjects? His truths inverted the order. They suggested that men, in their arrogance, were the ones most easily deceived, because they believed themselves immune to deception. He wrote that men often confuse possession with power. They believe that by claiming a woman, by binding her with vows or contracts, they have secured loyalty. But what he revealed was harsher, that the appearance of possession does not equal control. A woman may share a man's name, his home, his bed, but her true allegiance remains fluid, tied not to paper or promise, but to instinct, advantage, and survival. Men who ignore this truth stumble into ruin, building their lives upon sand. Men who understand it see clearly, and in seeing, they gain the power to navigate without illusion. The uncomfortable truths also dismantled the idea of innocence. Society clung to the image of the pure woman, untouched by desire until awakened by the right man. He rejected this fantasy outright. Desire, he argued, was not a gift bestowed by men, but a force already present, ancient and powerful, shaping women's choices long before any man entered the picture. This was not the delicate flower opening under male attention, but a force of nature, unpredictable, demanding, beyond the control of any single partner. To admit this was to shatter the fairy tales that cultures used to keep women within narrow roles, and to expose the reality that women were not passive recipients of male advances, but active players in the eternal game of survival and power. Perhaps the most dangerous of his claims was this, that the very traits men admired most in women were often masks. Beauty, gentleness, charm. These were not simply natural qualities but cultivated tools, sharpened to achieve influence. To a man, beauty seemed like a gift to be admired. To the psychoanalyst, it was a weapon, one that drew attention, disarmed judgment, and secured resources. Charm was not mere personality, it was currency, traded for protection, opportunity, and advantage. Even silence, he noted, was not absence of thought but a calculated refusal, a way of commanding attention without ever appearing to seek it. These revelations were intolerable, for they stripped away the illusions upon which men built their pride, their romances, their civilizations. To be told that their power was not absolute, that their dominance was often an illusion maintained only by women's cooperation, was to threaten the very fabric of order. And so, the psychoanalyst was not debated, not disproven, but dismissed, exiled, banned. His words were too sharp to be blunted, too corrosive to be absorbed, too dangerous to be allowed into the minds of men who might begin to see their world without illusions. You may wonder, why should the words of a banned psychoanalyst, silenced more than a century ago, still concern us now? After all, the world has changed. Women vote, lead nations, run empires of business and thought. Men speak of equality, of progress, of a society that has advanced beyond the battles of the past. But beneath the surface, nothing has changed. The illusions remain. The same myths that once blinded emperors now blind ordinary men. And the forbidden truths that shook his age still whisper in ours, daring us to see what we have been trained to ignore. Consider the modern man. He lives in a world of constant distraction, lulled by songs, movies, advertisements, all telling him the same story, that women are mysteries to be adored, angels to be worshipped, prizes to be won. The language has shifted, the costumes have changed, but the fable remains. Men are told to believe in love as eternal, in loyalty as natural, in romance as pure. Yet, at the same time, they find themselves betrayed, abandoned, bewildered when reality fails to match the dream. Divorce rates climb, relationships collapse, trust dissolves, and still men cling to illusions, wondering why their castles crumble into dust. This is why the psychoanalyst matters. His truths cut through the fabric of fantasy. He forces you to confront what polite society still denies, that relationships are not fairy tales, but negotiations of power, instinct, and advantage. When you see this, you no longer stumble blindly. You understand why a woman's affection burns brightly one day and fades the next, why loyalty cannot be assumed, why desire cannot be chained by vows. You recognize that what appears to be mystery is strategy. What appears to be devotion may be persuasion. What appears to be weakness is often strength disguised. And think of this. In an age where men imagine themselves free, how many are truly free? They bind themselves to illusions, offering loyalty without question, sacrificing ambition for promises that were never guaranteed. They hand over their power willingly, convinced that submission to fantasy is virtue. And when reality strikes, when betrayal unfolds, when the illusions are shattered, they rage against fate rather than against their blindness. The forbidden thinker offers a weapon against this blindness, not hatred, not despair, but vision, the ability to see relationships not as dreams, but as fields of power where clarity decides survival. Why does it matter today? Because men still ruin themselves on the same battlefield. They lose not because they are weak, but because they refuse to see. They build their lives upon illusions handed down through centuries. That women love unconditionally. That marriage guarantees loyalty. That charm is innocence. That tenderness is always genuine. These are not truths. They are comforts designed to keep men docile, to keep them blind to the deeper strategies at play. And as long as men cling to these comforts, they remain pawns in a game they do not even realize is being played. But when you look with the eyes of the forbidden psychoanalyst, the world sharpens. You no longer mistake beauty for virtue, nor affection for permanence. You see that love, loyalty, desire, all are bound to context, to opportunity, to necessity. You stop demanding eternity from what is by nature fleeting. You stop surrendering power in exchange for illusions. And in this clarity, you gain control, not over others, but over yourself. You cease to be a victim of betrayal, because betrayal no longer surprises you. You cease to be a victim of abandonment, because you understand that allegiance is conditional. You cease to be a victim of fantasy, because you have replaced fantasy with vision. Look around you today. Do you see men destroyed by heartbreak? Men who abandon their ambitions for promises of eternal love. Men who collapse when the woman they worship walks away. Do you see how easily their lives unravel? How quickly their power dissolves? Because they mistook illusion for truth. And do you not see how few men escape this trap? How rare it is to find one who can look at women, not with bitterness, not with blind adoration, but with clarity. That is why these forbidden truths matter now more than ever. In a world that feeds men fantasies faster than any age before, clarity is the rarest and most valuable weapon. Society will not hand you this weapon. It will hand you songs and slogans, telling you to love blindly, to trust without question, to surrender power as proof of virtue. It will celebrate your obedience and mock your suspicion. It will call you bitter if you seek clarity, cruel if you ask questions, dangerous if you refuse illusions. And yet, those who dare to see, those who dare to think with the sharpness of the forbidden psychoanalyst, are the ones who escape ruin. They are the ones who can walk through betrayal without collapse, who can engage in love without slavery, who can live with eyes open rather than blindfolded by myths. The uncomfortable truths he revealed were not meant for the masses. They were meant for those few willing to endure the weight of reality. For those rare individuals who prefer power to comfort, vision to blindness, truth to illusion. And so they remain as dangerous today as they were in his time, as unwelcome now as then, because they strip away the fantasies upon which society still depends. But for those willing to see, they remain the key, the only key, to navigating the eternal riddle of woman and the eternal battle of desire and survival.